The RMS Rhone is a shipwreck located just off of Black Rock Point, Salt Island in the British Virgin Islands. In September of 2013, I had the opportunity to survey the wreck where it lies in between 30 and 60 feet of water. The visibility that day was excellent and the weather fine, if a little cloudy. We entered the water with the first rolling backward plunge I had done in more than 20 years. We see my lovely bride and companion Kelly wearing blue fins and orange snorkel. Now we begin our descent into the clear blue waters. Kelly's signal here to the dive master indicates that the pressure of the descent is giving her trouble with her ears. To get concerned that Kelly won't be able to descend, concerned that I've forgotten to turn the camera on. Here we get our first view of the wreck of the Rhone. We're making our descent over the middle section, the most battered part of the hull. Uh-oh. This means that Kelly, indeed, has been unable to get her ears to adjust to the pressure. We'll be joining the group that descended ahead of us. That banging sound you heard was the dive master signaling someone. He's got some sort of a clacker, a rubber band with a hard plastic ball around his tank that makes that noise. I hope it wasn't me, because I clearly missed it at the time. I think that this box-like object is one of the Rhone's boilers. By now you may be wondering about the predominance of blue and green in all of these images. Yes, it really looked more or less like that. Red and then yellow are the first colors you lose as you submerge beneath the waves. The water filters out those frequencies, and all you're left with is the blues and the greens. Off to the right you will see a long, heavy artifact that I believe to be the Rhone's aft mast. Funny story. The Rhone sank in 1867. For about 85 years she rested in two pieces on the bottom of Black Rock Point and was more or less undisturbed, with her aft mast sticking out above the water. Then the U.S. developed a really cool underwater explosive, and it was at that point that someone decided that this was a navigation hazard and blew it up. I suspect that this decision was more about having a cool explosive than about navigation hazards. As we approach the bottom, you'll notice that almost everything is covered with a yellow-gray powder. That's sandy silt, and just about everything down here is covered with it one way or another. This critter caught my eye for some reason. It's called a blue tube sponge. I think that this large rectangular structure coming up is a condenser from the Rhone's propulsion system, but I'm not really sure. We're now just aft of amidships, moving forward on the bow section. This little puffer fish caught my eye for a moment, but one thing you learn really fast in underwater photography is that the fish are all faster than you. The Rhone rests on her starboard side. The column-like structure to our left is not the ship's ribs, as many people assume, but the steel framework of her upper deck. Up are the Rhone's signal cannons. She didn't use them to fight, just to communicate with other vessels. Now we get to see one of my persistent flaws as a diver. The artifact we're approaching is a lifeboat, David, and I couldn't resist swimming under it. Scuba gear extends almost a foot back from your neck. I can never remember to allow enough space for my breathing apparatus. Okay, wait for it. Bam. There it is. Caught my scuba gear on the overhang again. Dive master spotted an octopus, but there are a couple of problems here. The first is this dude, who is so focused on getting his shot that he is completely oblivious to me trying to line one up. The second and more clear is that the octopus is feeling shy and has retreated into a crack. What we've got here is simply an octopus eyeball, but there it is for your viewing pleasure. Here we have the work platform or crow's nest of the Rhone's foremast. To the left is the hull of the Rhone lying on her starboard side. This is a slightly closer look at the work platform. You can see all of the sea life that's moved aboard the Rhone in the 160 years since she came to rest on this spot. This is the swim through of the remaining section of the Rhone's hull. Wait for it. Bam! Because the space inside the Rhone is so large and the exits are clearly lit from both ends, it's a common practice for divers to indulge in this swim through even though they may not be fully qualified wreck divers. There's so much chaos in here that I can't really describe what we're seeing because I don't know what any of it is. Remember, we're headed aft, so the keel is on our right, the upper deck is on our left, the bow is behind us for most of this. Oh, and the quicksilver on the ceiling is our exhaust. That's what the bubbles breathed out by divers look like when they're trapped underwater. The lattice on our right is actual ship's ribs. Her outer hull makes up the wall on our right. Now, this was my first wreck, and as I moved through this environment, I was astonished. Look at the twisted, jagged mess that's left of the ship's infrastructure. There were two things that I could not get out of my mind. First was the power of the boiler explosion that destroyed her. And the second was what other wrecks must be like if this jumble of snag hazards is considered fairly clear and safe for most divers. Just think of the power necessary to twist and bend these huge hull components, all made out of steel and iron. That was some explosion. This is the site marker for the Rhone Marine Park. Set in 1980, it looks from a distance like a giant blue storage tub. My first thought when I saw it was, geez, what kind of a jerk dumps a storage tub in a marine park of all places? I wonder what's in it. I heard two stories about this black and white tile floor. The Rhone was a posh vessel designed with all the bells and whistles, including a ballroom. It's either the dance floor from the ballroom or the kitchen floor. I tend to go with the latter explanation. But you know, for 1860, a black and white tile floor would be pretty posh for a kitchen. This is the gearbox and propeller shaft for the Rhone. As you can see, the stern section is sitting more or less upright to this day. According to local lore, of the 23 survivors of the wreck of the Rhone, only one was a passenger. This porthole was, again according to local lore, number 26, and the cabin of the only surviving passenger. Other lore holds that it's called the Lucky Porthole because it still has glass in it. The brass is still shiny after 140 years on the ocean bottom because divers rub around the rim clockwise, for luck. In the early days of sport diving, artifact collecting was just another hobby. There was no ethical barrier to taking things from wrecks. As a result, well-known wrecks like the Rhone are extremely picked over, with almost nothing in the way of loose artifacts left on the wreck site. This object is a pewter spoon, and it lay on the coral long enough for the reef to grow up over the handle and concrete it into place. It's safe now from artifact thieves. There's a long involved story about Captain Woolley and his teaspoon that has grown up around this artifact. It's passed around the foredeck of diving boats and around bars where divers hang out, and thus this is called the Captain's Spoon. I'm not going to rant at you guys a lot, but I am going to say that any artifact taken from a wreck cannot be viewed by the divers that come after you. Don't be that guy. One of the Rhone's claims to fame was that she was one of two twin vessels that were the very first successful propeller-driven iron-hulled steamships. This is the Rhone's single propeller, over 15 feet in diameter. Made of bronze, the propeller, while coated with marine life, is not subject to corrosion and will remain as a marker and tombstone for the people who died in the wreck, even when the iron hull and steel frame have turned to rust and merged with the sea bottom.